She was at my wedding, my baby shower, every milestone. She was also sleeping with my husband. I want to start with a Tuesday afternoon in March. I'm sitting at a corner table in a coffee shop in Nashville, Tennessee. Across from me is a woman named Helen. She's 64 years old, silver-haired, wearing a cardigan with a small embroidered bird on the pocket. She has ordered chamomile tea, and she hasn't touched it. Helen is my best friend's mother. She called me 2 days earlier and asked if we could meet, just the two of us. She said she had something she needed to tell me and that she was sorry it had taken her this long. I didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe it was something about her health, or a family matter, or something relating to the charity committee we both served on. I did not think it was going to be the thing that it was. Helen put both hands around her teacup. She looked at me for a long moment. And then she said, "I am not your mother, but I've watched you for 11 years, and I love you like a daughter. And I think someone who loves you like a daughter should have told you this a long time ago." She told me everything. My name is Anna. I'm 35 years old. I have been married for 7 years to a man named James. My best friend since college is a woman named Brooke. She was my maid of honor. She threw my baby shower. She was the first person I called when I found out I was pregnant, and the first person I called when I lost the pregnancy. She was also sleeping with my husband. Subscribe and stay with me, because what I did after that coffee shop changed everything, and I mean everything. Let me tell you about Brooke. We met the first week of freshman year at Vanderbilt. She was my hallmate. The room 2 doors down, always open, always music playing, always someone sitting on the floor. She had the specific magnetism of people who make you feel immediately included, like you've known them longer than you have. We became inseparable within a month. The kind of friendship that forms in early college when everything is new and intense and you're constructing your adult self for the first time. She was part of the construction. She knew things about me that I hadn't told anyone. I knew things about her that she hadn't told anyone. We were each other's witnesses. Brooke was beautiful in the way that made people turn. Dark hair, easy laugh, the kind of effortless social grace that I admired and occasionally envied in the uncomplicated way you envy something in a person you genuinely love. She dated a lot, and nothing stuck, which she attributed to her standards being high, and I attributed to her being afraid of something she never fully named. I met James at a work event in the spring after graduation. He was a structural engineer, quiet, funny in the dry way of someone who saves their best observations for small rooms, the kind of man who remembers things you said 6 months ago and brings them up when it matters. We dated for 2 years before he proposed. I said yes in the kitchen of our first apartment, which was exactly how I would have wanted it. I introduced him to Brooke 3 months in. She liked him immediately. She said he was solid, which was her highest compliment. He liked her too. They had the easy rapport of 2 people who shared a person they loved. I remember thinking, I am so lucky. The man I love and the friend I love in the same room, laughing at the same things. I have thought about that moment many times since Helen's coffee shop. The wedding was in September of 2018. Brooke was my maid of honor. She gave a speech that made half the room cry. She danced with my father when he got nervous on the dance floor. She held my dress while I used the bathroom and laughed about it and made it funny instead of awkward. She was everything a best friend is supposed to be that day. Drop a broken heart in the comments if you already feel where this is going. Because the worst part isn't what happened. It's when it started. James and I built a good life. Not a perfect one, no life is, but a real one, with the texture of something that two people have actually constructed together. We bought a house in East Nashville. We got a dog, a rescue greyhound named Oliver, who was anxious about thunder and devoted about everything else. We had routines and arguments and reconciliations and the specific intimacy of people who have chosen each other enough times that the choosing has become its own kind of certainty. We tried to have a baby in year 3 of our marriage. It didn't go easily. There was one pregnancy that ended at 11 weeks, a loss that was quiet and devastating in equal measure, the kind of grief that doesn't announce itself loudly, but settles into everything. James was present through it in the way I needed him to be. Brooke was there within hours of my call, sitting on our couch, not saying much, just there. Looking back, and I have done a great deal of looking back, I cannot identify a single moment in those years when something felt wrong. That's what I keep returning to. There was no tension I missed, no change in behavior I dismissed, no moment where my instinct fired and I silenced it. Either I was not paying the right kind of attention, or they were both extraordinarily careful, or some combination of both. What I know now, from what Helen told me, and from what James eventually confirmed, is that it started in year 2 of our marriage. Not before. James was specific about that, as if the timing made it less catastrophic, which it did not. A work trip, a conference in Atlanta, where Brooke happened to also be attending an event. One evening that became a decision that became a pattern. 2 years. It had been going on for 2 years before that Tuesday in March. Brooke had been sitting on my couch during my miscarriage while this was happening. She had held my hand at the follow-up appointment because James had a work conflict. He couldn't move. She had planned my baby shower, the one we had the following year when the second pregnancy held. And she had stood in my living room, surrounded by pink and white balloons, and cried happy tears when I opened her gift. I have tried many times to reconcile those two versions of her. I have not succeeded. I'm not sure reconciliation is the right goal. Helen had known for 8 months before she called me. She found out because Brooke told her, not intentionally, but in the fractured way things come out when someone is carrying something too heavy. A conversation that started as something else and ended with a confession. Brooke immediately tried to walk back. Helen had spent 8 months deciding what to do with what she knew. Stay with me, because what Helen said to me in that coffee shop is something I've thought about every single day since. Helen told me everything in 45 minutes. She was precise and careful and clearly had organized what she wanted to say before she arrived. She told me the timeline as she understood it. She told me what Brooke had said and what she had inferred. She told me she had spent 8 months going back and forth, telling herself it wasn't her place, then telling herself it was. and that what had finally decided her was watching me at a dinner party 2 weeks earlier, laughing with Brooke, completely unaware. "You deserve to know," she said. "Not because knowing will make it hurt less. It won't, but because you deserve to make decisions about your own life with accurate information." I sat across from her and I listened to everything. I did not cry. This surprised me. I had assumed I would cry, that something would break open immediately. Instead, I felt a strange, very still clarity, the kind that comes when something you couldn't name suddenly has a shape. There had been nothing to name. And yet, something in me recognized what Helen was describing in a way that made it feel less like a revelation and more like a confirmation of something I hadn't known I'd been holding. "Does Brooke know you're telling me?" I asked. "No," Helen said. "Does James know you know?" "No." I nodded. I looked at my coffee. I thought about what Carol, Robert's wife, from a story I don't know, but whose question I've adopted as my own, would have asked, not "what do you want?" but "what does the situation require?" What the situation required was time. Not much. I am not a person who functions well in prolonged uncertainty, but enough to think clearly before I acted. "Thank you," I said to Helen. I meant it, without reservation. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "I'm sorry I waited so long," she said. "I kept telling myself it wasn't my place, but you would have told me. If the situation were reversed, you would have told me." "Yes," I said. "I would have." She nodded. "I know. That's why I finally called." I drove home that afternoon, and I sat in my car in the driveway for 20 minutes. Oliver was watching me from the front window, head tilted, waiting to understand why I hadn't come inside yet. I went in. I fed Oliver. I made dinner. James came home and we ate together, and I asked about his day, and he asked about mine, and I said it had been fine. I had 3 days of saying it had been fine while I got ready. Type strong in the comments if you could have held it together, because I barely did. In those 3 days, I did 4 things. First, I called my attorney. Her name was Rebecca. I had used her for a contract matter 2 years earlier, and I had liked her directness. I told her I needed to discuss the early stages of a potential divorce. She asked me to come in the following morning. I did. Rebecca walked me through what I needed to know: the financial picture of our marriage, the house, the joint accounts, the retirement funds. What documentation I should gather before having any conversation with James. What my rights were, and what the process would look like. She was efficient and kind in equal measure, and at the end of the appointment, she said, "Whatever you decide to do it from a position of information, not emotion." Second, I quietly made copies of our financial records, joint account statements, the mortgage documents, the investment account. I did this over 2 evenings while James was at the gym, methodically and without drama, and I stored everything in a folder in my personal cloud account. Third, I called my sister. Not to tell her everything, I wasn't ready for that, but to ask if I could come stay with her in Memphis for a few days the following week. She said of course, no questions, which is exactly why she is my sister. Fourth, I thought about Brooke. This was the hardest part of those 3 days. Not James. I knew what I felt about James, even if I hadn't said it yet. James had made a decision repeatedly for 2 years, and I understood with a terrible clarity, exactly what that decision said about the marriage I thought I had. But Brooke, who had been my witness, who had known me since I was 18 years old, who had sat with me through the miscarriage while this was happening, who had cried real tears, or what I had believed were real tears, at my baby shower. I kept coming back to that baby shower, to her face, to what it meant to perform that kind of love while doing what she was doing. I decided I was going to talk to James first, and then I was going to talk to Brooke. And the order mattered because I wanted James's account before I heard hers. I wanted to understand the shape of what they had agreed to say before I gave either of them the opportunity to coordinate. On the fourth day, a Friday evening after dinner, I asked James to sit down. I placed Helen's account, written out in my own words as precisely as I could, on the table between us. I need you to tell me if this is true, I said. He read it. He looked up, and in his face, I saw the specific expression of someone who has been preparing for a conversation and is now inside it and finds it worse than they prepared for. He said, "Anna, yes or no?" I said. A pause. Yes. Don't go anywhere, because what happened next is the part that still surprises me when I think about it. James talked for 2 hours. I let him. Not because I needed the explanation. I had already decided what I was going to do, but because I had spent 7 years in a marriage with this man, and I wanted to hear him say the true things out loud. Not the managed version, not the version designed to minimize damage. I wanted the real account. What he told me was this. It had started on the Atlanta trip, and he had told himself immediately afterward that it would never happen again. It had happened again. He had tried to end it twice and had not succeeded. He had told himself he was protecting me by not telling me, which he acknowledged in the same breath was a lie he had told himself because the truth, that he was protecting himself, was harder to say. He said he was sorry. Multiple times, in different words and with different emphasis, and I believed that he meant it each time. Sorrow and wrongdoing are not mutually exclusive. He had done something profoundly wrong, and he was genuinely sorry. And both of those things were true, and neither of them changed what I had decided. I want a divorce, I said when he finished. I've already spoken to an attorney. I'm going to stay with my sister next week while we figure out the first steps. He didn't argue. That surprised me a little. I had prepared for argument. Instead, he looked at the table and nodded, slowly, like a man accepting a verdict he had known was coming. "Is there anything I can do?" he asked. "Be honest with the attorneys," I said. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." He said he wouldn't. He kept that promise, which is the thing I am most grateful to him for in the entire aftermath. I called Brooke the following morning, Saturday, 9 a.m. She answered on the second ring, cheerful, asking how my week had been. "I need to see you," I said. "Today." Something shifted in her voice, just slightly. "Is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be. Can you come over at noon?" She came. She stood in my living room, the same living room where she had stood with pink and white balloons, and she looked at my face, and she knew before I said a word. Anna. Your mother told me, I said. The color left her face. I told her what I had told James, that I wanted a divorce, that I had already spoken to an attorney, that I was going to my sister's the following week. I told her that whatever she and James decided to do after this was their business, not mine. I told her that I had loved her for 17 years, and that what she had done was a betrayal so complete and so sustained that I did not currently have a framework for understanding it. I'm sorry, she said. She was crying. Real tears, and yes, I know I cannot always tell the difference, but these felt real. I don't have an explanation that's good enough. No, I said, you don't. Your mother told me once, I said, that the people who love us most are sometimes the ones who fail us most completely. Because they're the ones we give the most access to? Brooke looked at me. She said that? She did. I thought about it a lot this week. We stood in my living room for a moment. Oliver was between us, looking from one to the other, trying to read the room. Then I told her it was time for her to go. She left. I closed the door. I sat on the floor with Oliver for a long time. Type brave. If you think you could have had that conversation, because it took everything I had. The divorce was finalized 11 months after that Friday evening conversation. James was, as he had promised, straightforward with the attorneys. The house was sold. I hadn't wanted to stay in it, and he understood that without being told. The settlement was fair. We communicated through our lawyers for most of it, and directly for the pieces that required directness, and those conversations were civil in the careful way of two people who have decided that whatever anger exists is not worth the energy of performance. I moved into an apartment in Germantown in April. Oliver came with me, which was the one thing I'd been absolutely clear about from the beginning and which James had not contested. Brooke and I have not spoken since the Saturday she came to my house. She has tried. Texts, twice, that I read and did not answer. I am not opposed, in some distant future, to a conversation. I am not ready for it yet. Maybe I will be. Maybe I won't. That door belongs to me, and I will open it or not on my own timeline. Helen called me 3 weeks after everything became known. She was quiet and careful and asked how I was doing, in the way of someone who understands that "how are you doing" is a real question, not a formality. I told her I was okay, not fine. Okay, there is a difference. I've lost my daughter, she said. Not with accusation, with sorrow. She's not returning my calls. I thought about that, about what it had cost Helen to call me. Not just the 8 months of carrying what she knew, but the consequence of finally speaking, her own daughter's silence. You did the right thing, I said. I know, she said. It doesn't make it easier. No, I said, it doesn't. But you did it anyway. That matters. We have lunch occasionally now, Helen and I. It is one of the stranger things that has come out of all of this. A relationship that would not have existed without the catastrophe that produced it. She asks about my work and my apartment, and Oliver. I ask about her garden and her book club, and her health. We don't talk about Brooke or James. We don't need to. She is not my mother, but she is someone who chose to tell me the truth when it cost her something to do it. That is its own kind of love. People ask me sometimes whether I'm angry. The honest answer is yes, sometimes. Not constantly. Not in the consuming way of the early months. But occasionally, in the specific ambush of ordinary moments, a song, a smell, something Oliver does that makes me want to tell someone who knew him before. The anger is there. It's information. I let it be what it is, and I don't perform it. What I want to say about betrayal, because this story is, at its core, about two different betrayals, is that they are not the same. James's betrayal was a failure. A serious, repeated, sustained failure of the person he had promised to be. It hurt in the way that the ending of something real hurts. Not just the act, but the recalibration of 7 years of memory. The moments that were real and the moments that were performed, and the impossible task of sorting which was which. Brooke's betrayal was something different. Because Brooke knew me, she knew everything. She knew about the miscarriage and the fear and the specific vulnerability of loving someone so much that losing them would be catastrophic. And she chose, with all of that knowledge, to do what she did. Repeatedly. For 2 years. That's not a failure. That's a decision. I have thought a great deal about Helen in all of this. About what it took for her to call me. About the 8 months she carried what she knew. The back and forth of it. The cost of speaking and the cost of staying silent. She lost her daughter's trust, maybe permanently, to tell me a truth I deserved to have. There is a version of the world where Helen stays quiet, where I find out some other way, years later or never, where I spend the rest of my marriage in a version of it that isn't real. Helen didn't let that happen. Not because it was easy. It clearly wasn't, but because she decided that the truth mattered more than the comfort of silence. I think about that when I'm tempted to stay quiet about something difficult. The things we know and don't say because it's easier not to. The cost of that silence is always paid by someone. Usually by the person who most deserved the truth. Say the thing. Do it carefully. Do it kindly. Do it when you're ready. But say it. Helen did. It cost her everything with her daughter. It gave me back my life. It's been 14 months since that Tuesday in the coffee shop. I have a new apartment that is entirely mine. No compromises, no negotiation, no version of someone else's taste in the curtains. Oliver has claimed the couch completely, and I have stopped pretending this is not allowed. I went back to work full-time after the divorce was finalized. I'm a landscape architect. I design outdoor spaces for a firm in Nashville that I love. The kind of work that requires you to think in seasons and in patience and in the long view of how things grow. There is something appropriate about that, I think, in this particular year. I have started seeing someone. His name is Marcus. He is a high school history teacher who coaches baseball and reads too much and is quietly, consistently kind in a way that I recognize now as the thing I should have been looking for all along. We have been taking it slowly, which is the only speed that makes sense to me right now. James and Brooke are together. I know this because it is a small city and information travels. I don't have feelings about it that I can usefully act on. They are their own story now. I am mine. Helen sent me a card last month, a simple one, a painting of a garden, her handwriting inside, 3 sentences. She said she was well. She said she hoped I was well. She said she was glad she called. I kept the card. I put it in the drawer where I keep things that matter. Next to a photograph of Oliver as a puppy, a note from my sister, and a small pressed flower from my wedding bouquet that I have not yet decided what to do with. Maybe I'll throw it away. Maybe I'll keep it. It was a real day. The people who made it what it was turned out to be different than I thought they were. But the day itself was real. The love I felt was real. The version of myself who stood in that dress and meant every word was real. She's still here. She just knows more now. If this story found you at a moment when you needed it, if you're carrying something someone told you, or something you know and haven't said, or something you've lost that you're still finding your way through, leave me a comment. Tell me where you are. Subscribe for new stories every week. See you next time. All stories on this channel are fictional narratives created for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, companies, or events is coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of betrayal, truth-telling, and the courage to rebuild.